A pleasant good evening to you. It's 5 p.m. in the evening. Today, Wednesday, the 19th of April, and it's time for Leadership Plus this evening. And we are again going to be joined by our host, Reverend John Lewis, who is going to be sharing with us this evening. And today, we're going to be talking about priorities and the important role priorities and decision making plays in our lives as leaders. So stay tuned with us. We'll be right back with you in a few seconds to begin our evening program. We want to say thank you for joining us. Those of you that are listening on your radios, in your cars, at home, or if you are traveling on a bus, or if you are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube or on the Hope FM Grenada website. We thank you for joining us today, and we want to say to you, you can post your comments or your questions in the chat, and we will respond to them. Amen. We'll acknowledge and respond to them.
We are a chosen generation. We've been called for to show His excellence.
So, Reverend Lewis, it's my pleasure to invite you back with on Leadership Plus today, and thank you for being willing to share the abundance of knowledge you have with our audience who is listening out there to what you have to say. It's such a joy and a pleasure to have you with us this evening, and we want to say to you, welcome and greet the guests, those listeners online, please.
Thank you very much, but Trevor. It's always good to be with you and the Hope FM family, and the privilege to share on Leadership Plus week after week. So we welcome all of our viewers and listeners at this time as we examine our theme for today, our topic, which is entitled Priorities and Decision Making. The key factor here is making the most of your time. Making the most of your time. So we'll work through this discussion this evening with Brother T, and hopefully our audience will jump in with comments or questions, and look forward for a great time with you again this evening. Thank you everyone for joining.
So last week we spoke about the leader, the heart of a leader, and some powerful points came out with regards to the whole issue of vision and the role it plays in our lives, and how to take a dream into to make it into reality. And today we're going to talk about if you're going to take that dream and turn it in and turn it into a vision and make it into reality, there are some things that you as an individual got to do about your own life, your lifestyle, your day-to-day activities. So priorities and decision making, how to make the most of your time. Why is that important? And if you could lay the biblical context for that, I think that will be good.
Great. So there's a text found in Matthew chapter 23 and verse 24 says, "You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel." So as spiritual leaders, we know that Jesus died for us and that the ultimate mission is the Great Commission. So in our discussion today, we want to emphasize having the right guides, having the right decision making process. And there's a little test or quiz, as we might call it, as we begin our time together. And so you can write notes to yourself. How can I get more out of a day? Basically, as we know from Trevor, that all of us, no matter what we do, have each of us has 24 hours in a day, but some of us get a lot more done within a period of time than others. So here's some questions for us to consider. Check yes or no, and you could just make mental cues to this, or if you have written pads or iPads, do you plan tomorrow's work today? And so that is a critical question. If we're waiting, Amber and T, to plan the day's work on the same day, we are sort of left behind. And so it really challenges us to think ahead in terms of what we perceive, what our expectations are for at least 24 hours ahead. Some, of course, could do much longer period of time than that. Some people actually have to plan out their 6 months, 3 months. Some executives actually have to plan out a year ahead or more in terms of long-term, short-range planning. But this is something for, let's say, those of us who have a daily routine. But do you plan for it? Because what you'll find, unless you strategize for the day, at the end of the day, we can return back to our homes and probably ask ourselves the question, what have we accomplished today? Or where has the time gone? So that's a quick question that you can answer for yourself. And then secondly, do you perform routine chores at your daily low energy times and creative tasks at your high peak? So each of person, as we know, all of us have levels of low peak and high peak. So the responsibility is to do a more difficult task when we are at a high peak level. If we're going to attempt to do any challenging task or take on a responsibility at a low peak energy level, we will not perform and respond to that particular challenge. So sometimes our high peak are early in the morning, and for some it's still low. And so you have to know for yourself. Each person would need to identify their periods when they have a very high level of energy or when they have a low level of energy. And how we use the high peak energy that we have to do creative work, because that's when we are more creative than when we are exhausted or we're tired. Yes.
But going back to number one, where you talk about Planet a Day, what are some tools we can use? Because for that, because to plan, it means that you need to have an idea as to what's upcoming, or what are some of the things you may want to address or accomplish, or where you would want to be at that time, maybe for meeting. So you plan your meeting schedules, etc. What are some tools we have available? I mean,
well, the basic tool that we accustomed to is what you call a to-do list.
Okay.
But it is not a list that is arbitrary, because you could have 15, 20 or more things on a to-do list. But the secret to success, to accomplish your priorities. So what is recommended is that, say that we have 10, 15 things, we number them in order of priority.
Okay.
If it's just arbitrary list, like go to the supermarket or, stop by the gas station or make phone calls. And just on the issue of making phone calls, what they recommend to us is that to block your calls within a period of time if possible.
Right.
So if it were possible that you have several calls to make, you can maximize the time if it is blocked out within, say, an hour, for example.
Okay.
We may not get all of our contacts within that hour, so you have to go back. But you try to connect as much as possible so that you're not spreading out your day in such a way, trying to track down the people that you need to connect with. So another recommendation is that you respond to emails in a particular time frame as well.
Right.
I mean, there are things that will pop up because we have it at our fingertips. Unless it's extremely urgent. And one of the things that you can do to avoid lengthy responses is to acknowledge. I mean, that's just a courtesy. That receive, that knowledge, will respond to
Yes.
later. Because we have all the frustration of waiting for people's response to our communication. And so back to the question you asked about setting your priority list together. So we must determine, because basically what we're doing is to just put down an arbitrary list, 1 to 10, for example. But number 10 could be the number 1, actually.
Right.
You know, so because we have just put it arbitrarily, or just not in a particular sequence of priorities. And then, so number 10 now becomes your number 1.
Yeah.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
And so number 7 could be your number 2. So what would happen in your day, for example, is that you accomplish the priorities.
Right.
There may be some things that you could not accomplish, you know, because of how it turns out.
Right.
But because you have done a priority list, at least 5 things or so, that has a red mark to it, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the things that you accomplish.
And of course, there are some that you could, if you can accomplish, you could delegate because it's not high priority.
Right, low priority.
But another point I see that's important with this is also for your reporting, whether it's to your board or to your to senior management or to the staff in terms of what has been accomplished in a week or in a month. This, you could go back to that and see exactly, you know, the date and what you accomplished on that day. And in case there's a question arise about your productivity, you know.
Right. So it's recorded.
Yes.
It's recorded.
Right.
So the mistake that, you know, sometimes is made is that we try to keep all this information in our heads. And as soon as you reach out on the road where it becomes busy, you realize, you know, I'm so far out, for example, you're so far away from where the activity should be done that it's too late to turn around.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, you were right next door to it.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, just a practical illustration. You're going to buy gasoline for the vehicle, but the supermarket is in the same space. But you put the supermarket on number 9 or 10.
Right.
So what you discovered, you take the gasoline or diesel, whatever, and you're now 2-3 miles away from that particular supermarket that you intended to stop by. And so it's either you have to put it off till the next time or to readjust the schedule. So basically, it is a time management issue as well. But it really helps you in terms of you're going to a particular location, and I mean, just for general bills and you know, things that must be done. Like if you don't settle this particular transaction, you may lose your service, for example.
Right.
And so, for example, you go into the mall, but the services are there. Depends on which company you use. Supermarket is in there, and there's several places that you must pay. The banks are in there even. So one of the mistakes that we make is that we do one activity, accomplish one thing, and get on the road with some other things, only to find out we need to go back to the mall because we didn't put that down in terms of priority and block it. So, you know, planning that means that we block items together that are in close proximity to one another.
Yeah.
You know, so that you're not instead of getting things done in St. George, you're out in Grenville.
Yeah.
And while you're traveling that far, we're using Grenada as an example. Um, it's too late to come back in. You would not get back into St. George's in time,
Mhm.
to fulfill an obligation like that.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's just so critical. And those are simple actions we could take, but it helps you to maximize more that you can get done in a single day than,
Mhm.
if you just averagely think that, you will remember because after some point we do not recall everything um, by memory power alone. And
True.
some of us, as we
And
get
that,
older,
and,
we have to
and
write things down.
that is not a sign of getting old. It's just that it's good to make a list.
It is. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plan out your work today. And then do you get unpleasant duties out of the way as soon as possible? Now, that's a challenge for many people that we
Mhm.
procrastinate a difficult task. For example, that you um, have to deal with a matter of conflict, and natural tendency is that we want to leave that for the end of the day, because we we try to avoid it as much as possible. Um, the unpleasant duties, whatever that may be. But it is highly recommended at the start of your day where you can think more creatively, and you respond quickly and better to the difficult responsibility that you have to accomplish. But there's a tendency for us to put it off, procrastinate, reschedule. We'll deal with that tomorrow because
Mhm.
we don't want to really deal with it now. But it's in the back of your mind and it's probably haunting us because we know that we have to face it at some point in our schedule. Um, so I experienced that with one of our Youth for Christ directors many years ago. We had to meet a board person, a board, the chairman of a board. There was a challenging issue, and as you understand, that was the first thing that we did as we began the day. You know, deal
Mhm.
with that, so it's not only troubling you,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
and distracting you. Because if you don't deal with those challenging ones, it's going to preoccupy your mind still
Mhm. Mhm.
that it affects the other things that you should
Yeah.
get done. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
So the unpleasant task.
Pleasant duties.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
Face it.
and
Face it. Face it head on.
yes,
Yeah. Get it resolved or
yes,
whatever. But at
yes.
least it is being addressed.
That's right. And very often it's not as bad as you thought it would be.
True. 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 True.
Very often.
And when your mind is clear and fresh, you can think better.
You're
You
right.
can
You
make
could
you can
get the
make
other
more,
things
more
done.
wiser, more wise decisions. Yeah.
Great. Yes. So do you mentally preview the day's work in the beginning of the day? So there's a preview of what the day may look like. Of course, it may not turn out exactly like how you planned it, but at least there is some thinking ahead of it, and you trying to figure out how much time does it take you to get from point A to point B.
Hmm.
Now, you know, it calls all of us to be observant and like you read the traffic sign, you read the traffic flow in the area in which you live.
Yeah.
For example, I had an experience right in Grenada yesterday. Was now if you're coming from St. George's and you're going to Grand Anse, for example, at 5 o'clock is a great time to do that run. There's hardly any traffic going out of St. George to Grand Anse that moment. So what you have is free traffic flow. If you're trying to do that at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, you're in
Mhm.
big trouble because it's just snail traffic. So those are, simple calculations. Sometimes you're caught in it because of appointments that may clash with how did your traffic flows within your neighborhood. So you understand
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Don't leave home 7:30, say from St. David, to try to get him to St. George's for 8 o'clock. It doesn't happen anymore.
Can't walk.
No. So no matter which route you take, so it means that unless you leave at 7 o'clock, you probably won't get there until in time for 8 o'clock. So basically routing, understanding, and every no matter where we live, we use the transportation, whether it's private or public transportation. Um, and it can determine whether we spend 2 hours to get from A to B, or we can get it done in half an hour.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true.
So you have a mental preview of how you get around your own vicinity. Whether you live in Grenada or live in other parts of the globe. Um, so, for example, people will stay on later at their job place
Mm-hmm.
to get home because it takes less time if you do that than if you're just following, say, the regular 5 o'clock traffic.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So that's just one example. Using that as an illustration um, of how we do that, a mental preview. Um, are you able to deal with people who waste your time? Now, there are people who take they find it a sport or they find it a joy, to
Holy
plan
in a,
out some.
holy in a old talk.
Yeah, yeah,
Before the
yeah,
day start,
yeah,
in the morning, they come and they
yes,
pack up right next to your office door, and some
yes.
whole. Ah
Whole
man.
conversation that doesn't mean anything at all. So, I mean, you have to be gracious, but there's a way to get out of those.
Yes. Yeah.
Reschedule, it's great
Yeah.
we need to meet, but let's do that at a time, at a
Yeah.
different time.
I think I
Yeah.
think every manager or leader when they see such people waiting by the door, first thing in the morning,
They,
their countenance drop.
oh, they go to the back door. Uh, and it brings back number 6. Do you know how to log your time?
Mm,
That is, occasionally write down just how long it takes to accomplish each day's task. We mentioned that earlier, logging your time. Um, because if we don't, I mean, we basically end up with a question, where has the time gone?
mm-hmm.
But how much time does it take you to get in and out of the banks, for example? And that is just another critical observation that you have to make.
Yeah.
Don't get to the bank 8 o'clock Monday morning. I mean, it takes you 2 3 hours if you're not careful,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all the weekend banking on Monday morning, basically. But unless it's really critical, you can get it Tuesday or Wednesday,
Right.
and you see the difference in terms of the time that you have to do a transaction.
Yeah.
You know that there are times in our banking, there's nobody in the line at
On the
all.
line, yeah. Between 10:30 and 11:30.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, so those are just ways to try to understand your context,
Yeah.
and everyone's context is different, whether you live in one side of the country or another part of the world. What it is that works for you, but having these facts ahead of your time really can, because you don't want to stand up in the line for 2 hours,
Mm,
um, which means that if you think through, it could be an half an hour or
yeah.
less than that in some situations. So log in your time is going to be critical. When you promise that you'll get something done on time, do you always try to keep your word?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
getting things done on time,
Mm-hmm.
it's a question of um, accountability. It's a question of you know excellence, whether how you respond to responsibility that you carry. Can people trust you to deliver on time, or if for some reason it cannot be done, at least there is communication that um, we need a day or we need another 2 days or whatever the case might be. But yes.
I think it's also good for you because it helps you to avoid being stressed.
Hmm.
When you avoid yourself being stressed or you put on that pressure, or even I would say rushing, trying to rush, and then you make a mess of it. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So.
that leads us to the idea of how do you commit, what do you commit yourself to do?
Mhm.
And we'll come to that because one of the words that we will have to deal with is the little word NO, which we do not respond to it,
Respond to
all the
well.
requests
Mhm.
that we asked to do. Do you set aside a portion of each day to think, to
Mhm.
create, and to plan? Now, if we do not do that, that we just get going, crank up the engine and we're gone without any creative thinking ahead of time, is that we would find ourselves, if we're not careful, going around in circles
Mhm.
because there's no thinking ahead, no planning ahead. Um, and for example, you may think that you have some activity or project 2 weeks out and think that's a long time. Of course, we now know that that goes by so quickly. And what that means is that if you're doing several things in a particular time frame, it's how do you budget for each one
Mhm.
so there's not crisis management as we come closer to the time.
Yeah.
So strategic thinking and planning is important when you're um, having several things that may occur during the same time frame. And one of the things, just basic folders, now that is on the equipment that you have. So creating folders for particular projects
Mhm.
is critical so that everything is not thrown in one folder.
Yeah.
I mean, years ago, you have to have actual literal folders,
Yeah.
and you have a stack of folders, with different things. But even then, you specific things are in a specific folder, um, so that a particular project, all that is required and for that project is in that particular folder on your laptop, computer, um, wherever you store your material. So it's like unless we dump everything in one big folder, then we can't find it. We can't locate it. So,
Mhm.
for example, you have a project that needs to be completed, say by the end of this month. It cannot be combined with projects you have for the end of May, for example.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you lose track of what the deadlines are
Right.
for the end of April, for example. And so, how do we create those folders in an organized way? And even looking at 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road.
Mhm.
And so, what I say to our guys in planning, for example, planning a conference, as part of our responsibility these days, we are planning a conference in Guyana,
Mhm.
a Lausanne conference.
Mhm.
But the responsibility of planning for that conference, it's a weekly Zoom call,
Mhm.
and that's required a time commitment.
Right.
Not everyone may make the call every week, but that's
Mhm.
the commitment. And then that there are assigned tasks for each person. And so there's reporting every week. What did you accomplish? What you said that you would do within
Mhm.
the interim from one meeting to the other.
Right.
And so it's consistency in terms of how that happens. Otherwise, if they are not, what I would refer to in our meetings as a timeline. Let's create a timeline so that by the end of this month in particular,
Yeah, we know. We
we,
know. Yeah. Yeah. Where you are.
right, right, right. Otherwise, you will end up, say, for example, in July.
Mm-hmm.
and just scrambling how we did we
Yeah.
get these pieces together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it comes back to the strategic thinking. That's why it says take time to think and to create and to be disciplined in those activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's as you mentioned that that's a good conference. I think church leaders should seek to attend because the times we live in requires us to understand what the mission is
Mhm.
and where we're going to focus our attention, you know,
Yes.
to ensure that we fulfill the Great Commission. So it is important for us to have interactions with those who have a sort of global picture that
Hmm.
so that we can be more focused and zero in on what our priorities in this region is at this time.
Great. And then the other question is your workplace tidy? Can you find what you need without wasting time? Uh,
I would say that's relative because sometimes you know where you have put stuff on your desk. You can- un- Unless your wife comes and move things around.
No, I don't know. That has to be a gift of a genius because we have all been into offices where you can't see the person. You enter the office and the person is sitting behind some piles of
Files and
paper,
papers
and you're looking around the desk. Where is the person that is supposed to have this meeting with?
and-
But there's some order in the madness. I'm not sure.
yeah.
Yeah, but because if you cannot locate a particular
Yeah.
well, of course, as you know, there's active files and there is files that they are dormant or
Mhm.
however we classify them.
Yeah, well, get out
So
of your
that
desk. If
yeah,
they
yeah, it's a dormant file.
yeah,
Yes,
send them back to
to
the
be,
registry or something.
yes, yeah, no, put them
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Some
But
people maybe keep that for that they look important, that they doing plenty work. When in truth they may be hiding behind the file sleeping.
behind them, so you can't see them. But executives, and we would know this too, Trevor, is that you go to the desk. You
Clean.
tell us the guys who get the work done is just a single notepad on the
Yeah,
desk.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Desk is clean.
Yeah, single laptop, computer, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all that they basically need for that particular time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how do we manage that? Is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have an efficient filing or organization system?
Mm-hmm.
How do we know where to find stuff?
Yeah.
Um, do you know how to choose your most productive task?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Some tasks do not. Well, don't swat a fly with a 2x4. They tell us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it takes so less energy to get this job, but it takes more to get the greater job.
Yeah. And as you mentioned that whole issue of filing, I've
Mhm.
come to realize that um, even with the age, computerization, etc., it's extremely important that you save your files with the right name.
Mhm.
It saves you a lot of time trying to find documents.
Yes, because they're not labeled properly.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not no secret thing. You can't have 10 files with meeting report for what? Which meetings report? And I've seen that, and I said no.
And you can't
Don't
locate
send me,
it.
don't
Yeah.
send me files like that. Or don't send me reports from a meeting like that. Give me the name of the
Date of the
meeting,
meeting.
the time, the date. All that should be in the file.
So
Type.
that you could locate it
It's
quickly.
very
Otherwise, you
easy.
have to open all the 10 files.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
that's extremely important, especially
Mhm.
with where you're working with documents on your computer. Sometimes you have
Yes.
to share a document, and you spend an hour trying to find this document to share. That,
If you're
because
not
of
careful,
poor
you share the
filing.
wrong document. You share the
Yeah,
wrong document.
poor name, poor naming and filing.
Yes. And then, lastly, on this checklist, do you know exactly what your top priorities are? Now, That's a challenging question. If we do not, it goes to say naturally that if we do not know what our priorities are, we cannot accomplish them.
Yeah.
So how do you determine that? So if
Well,
you are following, yes, if you are following these 12 quiz questions, if you got yes from 10 to 12, you're good. You handle time excellently. If 7 to 9, but you still need to grow, you're good, but still need to grow. If yes to 6 or below, you're wasting valuable time and may not even know it. So if our viewers, listeners were following these and making notes for themselves, it provides an evaluation for these questions for us. Good. So, question: what are some areas in your day where you can improve? What are some areas in your day where you can improve? There's always a room for improvement in your day. So it's a question for each listener, viewer. Yeah.
I think something I didn't see on this list here, which I think is extremely important, is
Okay.
is starting meetings and ending meetings.
Right. Yeah. Setting a time frame around meetings. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's important because if there's an understanding that this meeting starts promptly at a particular hour and it should finish, promptly at this particular hour, and that happens, then people can manage the time better. If it's an open-ended meeting, it starts any time that people shows up, or there's no particular set time when we're going to close this meeting, then people show up any time for the meeting and expect you to wait for them and finish the meeting at their convenience.
Or we start the meeting to deal with the issue.
Right. Yes. So you have to go review all that you did with the other people.
Yeah.
In order to bring some people up to date.
Whenever I get an invitation to a meeting and I'm sent an agenda, the first thing I ask is, how long is this meeting going to be? When it's going to start and when it's going to end? Because a meeting must have a start and an end time. Don't invite me to a meeting and I don't know when it's going to end. I don't have the whole day to give to you. It's impossible.
Absolutely.
So tell me, I know, so I could plan my other activities after.
Yeah. It's a challenge, especially in the religious circles.
Yeah, we have this attitude that we have an unlimited amount of time because it's God's business to gift it, but God's business requires urgency, and we must deal with it in an urgent manner, meaning manage your time. Time management is exceedingly important, and if the meeting is going to be from 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, when 3 o'clock, I expect us to address all the matters on the agenda and wrap up, and that meeting is wrapped up. Decisions made, and we move on. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time, waste of time.
Well, if the meet at the end time is set for the meeting, you can gracefully exit from the meeting.
You're trying to manage offense.
Yes. But if it's an agreed time that this is when we finish, and it looks like we're half with the agenda, then you have to ask for an excuse.
Yeah, because people start fidgeting and they lose interest, and it's just a waste of time after a certain period of time. People lose interest. The decision making then becomes very poor, disjointed, disorganized. That's when you reconvene, you have to go over that issue again because it was not dealt with properly. So it's important to have a start time and an end time for your meetings, that people know we have certain amount of time to make decisions. Don't come there and try to teach, preach, try to show intelligent you are, etc. Just deal with the issues. Meetings are held to make decisions. That's what they have a meeting for.
Yes, we have a lot of examples of how people treat meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they come to the end of the meeting and they want to start their own meeting. So yeah, well, we have to figure out how to deal with that. So moving along, there's some biblical answers and priorities here. So we start with the life of Christ, of course. Um, his priority was very early in the morning while it was still dark. He got up, left the house, went off to a solitary place where he prayed.
Mm-hmm.
Simon and his companion went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to a nearby village so I can preach there also. That is why I have come."
Mm-hmm.
So the priority here is one of solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's almost a lost word in our vocabulary these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the time demands, the, the busyness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, uh, there is the concept that if you're busy, well, you must be doing something
Mm-hmm.
important. But someone has remarked that there's a sort of kind of barrenness to busyness that leaves you drained.
Somebody's
And
asking a question. Does time management apply to Bible study and prayer meeting?
no, you probably want to get the pastors in trouble. Um, yeah, of course. I mean, if, for example, you said we're doing a Bible study from 7 to 8:30, I think an hour is great. I mean, hour and a half maximum. I think it gives people a time frame. So it is not a discussion that gets off track. And so that's where the leadership comes back because all these concepts you're talking about is for good leadership. Who is leading this particular Bible study, for example? Is the person prepared? Um, like everything else, Brother Trevor, if the leader is not prepared for meeting, people knows that. And so what tends to happen, we just um, gamble with the time or waste people's time because we ourselves have not come prepared for the meeting in the same way. And perhaps in a greater way, if you're preparing to lead a Bible study or a prayer meeting, it means that you're going to take the same effort and time to pray rather than just to show up and open the doors and let's pray or let's have a Bible study. And I said to pastors and leaders, look, we have enough printed material that could prepare people ahead of time for the Bible study so that we are not coming to open up the Bible and find a passage, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there are some churches that would have a series,
Mm-hmm.
or they might print a notebook, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said to pastors and leaders, the material that we are sharing here is available that they could use as a guide
Mm-hmm.
for their teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a document, and people come prepared that so they're aware of the discussion that is going to be taking place. And so there we maximize the time. And so it's a guided discussion. It is not just some arbitrary, somebody pulls an idea out of the hat, as it were, and raise an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they're raising is really off the topic that we want to discuss this evening. So
Right.
you just point out that we appreciate your question, but for now that is not the issue. We will
Yeah,
respond
one
to that
second.
question
Mm-hmm.
perhaps at a later time. I'll give you an example of that. I was doing a presentation on teamwork among some a group of people, educators, and one of the bright persons within the group, out of the blue, asked a question. What do you think about homosexuality?
Mm-hmm.
I sensed right away that was a question to distract you.
Mm-hmm.
So I kindly said, it's a great question, but it is not, related to this we are doing today. And you saw this wry smile on his face because it was an attempt to derail you. You'll find people within the audience who would seek to do that with you.
Okay.
But that is because you're unprepared and you want to respond to every question
Right.
that someone would ask you.
Mhm.
Yeah. So preparation. It's either you prepare or repair, like we discussed in some other discussions. But it applies to every area that we serve in, whether it's in the church environment, even as important as prayer is, and we give great importance to prayer.
Mhm.
Unless you agree that this particular night we're having a half-night prayer meeting, or in some cases an all-night prayer meeting. Well, there's no limitations. You know ahead of time that that's the agenda for this particular prayer gathering.
Mhm.
So you come prepared, and you can leave whenever you need to. But if it is a regular occasion for prayer, which is somewhere between an hour and a half, 2 hours, um, the leader guides the process to keep within that time. So everyone is on the same page. If you're doing a training, then people know that it begins at this particular time, it should end at this particular time. And you work within a particular time frame and you make adjustments. One of the things that you will learn through our leadership programs is that you have to be observant as well when the audience is saturated. So there are times when you're teaching or you're training, whatever the activity is, that you keep a temperature on your audience.
Mhm.
You cannot have your audience falling asleep on you and you still have 2 hours to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You send them home.
Yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate, guys been here, but it is not productive for us to be sleeping.
Mm.
That's not the point of our gathering. And you feel free to dismiss at a particular time. So but observation of your audience. What is the feeling? What is the atmosphere, the environment in which you serve? And those are some critical facts. So yeah, keeping your ear on the ground and your eyes on the audience as a leader helps you to make decisions that are important. Important. So of course, in this case, the priority of Christ was solitude,
Mhm.
and it's something we need to emphasize.
Yeah.
It is in the midst of in the environment of solitude, that we're able to think clearly. Uh, it's in this environment of quietness and rest that we're able to,
Mhm.
in this case, the communication with God and but quietness in your own spirit, and it pulls you away from the crowd.
Mhm.
And although Jesus, of course, is God, he needed that time.
Yeah.
I've been in the human flesh. Um, and so, where is solitude in your life? It's a good question for all of us. Where is the place of solace and
Solitude. Yeah.
solitude and rest? Yes. And then, secondly, is there's a scripture here about Martha and Mary. We know that story
Mhm.
very well, and combined with the activity side of life, in the sense of Martha, and then in the
Mhm.
case of Mary, wanting to have communion and fellowship with Jesus. And so we we're in one or two of those categories most of the time,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, with regards to this one here with Mary and Martha, we Martha, um, you know, was concerned about the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? The work, getting the work done, making the preparation and all the arrangements, etc. And sometimes you have those people in your organization, and you as a leader have to be cognizant of the fact that they too need solitary times. They need to be to sit and be fed and be empowered. Solitude, and you have a right to make that decision and say you are going and get some rest. You are going and have
You
than
take a break, yeah.
than you walking them, and think, oh, it's great. They could make their own arrangement. As a leader, you're supposed to be able to point it and say, hey, you've been working here for the last year and a half. You need a vacation.
Of
Go
course,
2 weeks,
yes.
3 weeks,
Yeah,
and come back refresh. Nothing
exactly.
wrong. You're not your business is not going to suffer for that. In fact, I think your business will be better in a better position when you have
Right.
revitalized, refreshed, empowered workers
Mhm.
on your team.
Exactly. There's another category here, another priority. It is for leaders, church leaders. And the example is that of the Acts chapter 6 context, where they needed leaders to take care of um, the women who were being neglected within the
Mm-hmm.
church.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had to give priority in the sense of the apostles to the teaching and preaching of scripture. And so that's where we make decisions about what we give priorities to. If as in the pastoral sense, a leadership role, your responsibility mainly is to teach and preach the word and assign people
Mm-hmm.
with the same giftings that they're comfortable with to take care of the other needs of people around you. Because you will notice that is the same requirement that they requested of them.
Mm-hmm.
Men and women, full of the Holy Ghost, wisdom, mature, the same characteristic that they required of themselves, they required of other people who did other tasks,
Mm-hmm.
carried out the other responsibilities within the church community in the early church in terms
And,
of
and
reference.
and I know they use a word here, who are known to be full of the spirit and
Mhm.
wisdom. you
Yeah.
know and and so many times you see people may be filled of the spirit, but they have no wisdom. But
Mhm.
they're given tasks and responsibilities, and when they
Right.
feel they are whipped, you know
Mhm.
they are they are punished and made to say, well, we expected better. But how could you expect
Mhm.
better, and the person the person didn't have doesn't have wisdom.
Right. Right. So you don't put them in that place. Yeah. So that's why the selection was so important.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, we make decisions about what we might consider um, low demanding tasks, for example,
Hmm.
and we assign people that we don't require much from them.
Hmm.
So the expectations is lower than, say, the leader's role and responsibility, but it's the same requirement in terms of character, um, same same sense of values that they should have. And then in Hebrews chapter 12, uh, solve everything that hinders and fix our eyes on Christ. So that refer to giving priority to what keeps us going or in the right things is how we're finishing well,
Hmm.
so that we not allow um, the things that drag us back or um, hinder us from reaching the goal. So lay aside those things, cut them off in some ways, uh,
Well,
so that we can complete the race, because that's one of the pictures in the Hebrews.
well, what are some hindrances as a leader?
Right.
No,
Well, that's a good question.
because he talks about hindrances and then he talks about sin, right?
Mm.
Let's talk about hindrances now, because they could be as weighty and as burdensome as sins, right? So what at times we really are not aware of them, or we don't give them the attention they need to be dealt with, so what are some what could be some distractions
All
and
right. Well,
hindrances?
right. That's an important discussion, because we go back to some values and
Mm-hmm,
character traits,
mm-hmm,
um, like integrity issues,
mm-hmm,
right? We constantly have to be on the guard for each of our lives, where our integrity is questioned or
mm-hmm,
questionable. Those if we have um, shady um, remarks or uncertainties in our lives, then it hinders us from becoming
mm-hmm,
our best you. Then accountability is a word that we throw around a lot, but the question, it has to be still there. Um, who is it that keeps you accountable? What it is that protects your integrity, so that there is some measure of answering to someone in your life, so that it keeps you on target. Because the research shows that the men and women of great stature, as we may call them, who have fallen, um, when we look at the research and the literature, they had no one to whom they were accountable.
mm-hmm,
Yes. So it really it it gives us pause in our own life,
mm-hmm.
um, in terms of the hindrances, um, transparency, and these are words that we talk often about. Um,
When you say accountable ability, and it say that these men, they had no one that they were accountable, but they were leaders of major organizations. So are you saying,
major.
so are you saying, that they were at a stage where they felt that um they are at the top of their game. They are, they're ahead, they're in charge, they're in control. um
Yeah.
Nobody could tell them what to do. Nobody could speak to them,
Right.
could correct them, could give a word of counsel, advice, or etc. That's basically what you're
Right.
saying.
That's what happened in those cases. Whether it's in the area of financial integrity,
Mm-hmm,
whether it's in the area of morality,
mm-hmm,
uh, or the areas of pride. Uh,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
right.
so those are some of the things we have to safeguard.
So you always have to be, as a leader, a manager, owner of a business, whatever, you always have to be at the stage where hey, somebody's watching me, watching what I'm doing. Of course,
And then you invite somebody to do that as
yeah,
well.
yeah. You have God. Of course, we know God is there, but sometimes
Oh, yeah.
we think God is far away,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
and He will overlook, and overlook this. I haven't seen that, or you know, me and God is okay. So I understand. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Because the men who have finished well, and some of them have passed on, one of their practices was to meet with two or three other people in their
Mhm,
lives, sometime once a week or once every 2 weeks, for breakfast, or some time they get together.
mhm,
And they had the right to ask each other about how are they doing.
mhm. Right, 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 right. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Able to ask people, someone, how am I doing? You know,
Yes, yes.
am I, you know, am I on the right track? You know, is there anything I
Right.
need
So,
to correct?
let them be honest with you and
Yeah.
give you feedback in how people may perceive you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because self-perception is not always correct.
Yeah, right. Right.
You
Yeah.
may think you're doing the greatest job,
Yeah.
you
True.
know, and
True.
you're doing the best thing, but from some other perspective,
Mm.
there's some areas that we need to take note of.
And that is not people who just rubber stamp. Who that's
No, those
yeah.
are people be honest with you and
Yes. Yeah. Right.
just tell you exactly, what they observe about you
Mm.
with your attitude, with your actions, with your practices,
Okay.
and your willingness to admit, yes, these are some things I never really looked at
Mm-hmm.
personally,
Mm-hmm.
and it keeps you on track and keeps you
Mm-hmm.
out of
Okay.
falling away.
So that's a mark of a good leader. Right.
Right, those would help you. Those would help us all to finish well.
Right. Okay. Hmm. Thank you. That's a good point.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well,
we may not
always,
finish this.
yeah, always finish.
Yeah,
And
yes, of course, and we're about halfway
yeah,
in this.
when the information is good, I think time goes by quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll pick it up from here next week, God's willing.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
We need to.
Yeah.
All right, well, Reverend Lewis, it's a pleasure having you. As always, sharing with us from the leader's perspective, how to make yourself, how to be a better leader, and so maximize your true potential, God-given potential, because God has called us to lead, and this is such a powerful package that for us to use, that we have to be able to understand that God has called us to lead, but leadership requires knowledge, it requires training, capacity building, etc., so that we could fulfill the task and do it very well. So thank you.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. We wanted to ask you to join us again next week, and we'll be back with you on Leadership Plus. So, any final words?
Right. Just to put a little plug here for Joan Purcell class on Friday. If you would still like to join, give us a call. Contact Hope FM. It's Friday evening, 5 to 8 p.m. at the guide office in Jalangley, and you can get further information. It's a series of 6 sessions beginning this Friday coming, and you're invited to join us. You can order the class. As a matter of fact, you can just take this particular course if you're interested to learn about the conflict in the kingdoms. Basically, that's the theme focus of the discussions over these next few weeks: kingdoms and conflict. And Joan Purcell has written his book based on that, and will help us to understand the concepts clearer for interaction and discussion. Give us a call, and you can get information on the Hope FM website and information.
Amen.
Looking forward to seeing some of you there.
All right. God bless you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for those of you who have posted comments that you're enjoying the information and that it's a blessing to you. Angelic Voices, God bless you and have a great evening. See you again next Wednesday as we continue with Leadership Plus, looking at priorities and decision making.
Okay, good evening, everyone.